Conversations about psychological health and safety are increasing in frequency and expanding in both breadth and audience size. We're going to talk with someone who is sharing the importance of this topic, not only with those in the workplace today, but also with young people as a foundation for shaping their lives in the future. Up next on this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Our goal for each episode is to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. When we talk about safety, most people think of hard hats, seatbelts, fire drills. These conversations are generally held with adults, who are already in the workforce. But what about young people before they enter the workforce, start a business, or engage in a social organization? Teaching youth to identify psychosocial hazards early, it gives them the language and confidence to speak up. It helps them understand that stress, anxiety, or exclusion aren't just a part of life. They're signals that something in the environment needs to change. When young people learn to see psychosocial safety as a right, not a privilege, they become empowered to protect themselves and to support others. This awareness builds resilience, empathy, and actually leadership. It prepares them to create healthier schools, workplaces, and communities. And most importantly, it plants the seed that safety isn't only about avoiding physical or psychological harm. It's about fostering environments where everyone can thrive. So in this episode, I'm going to talk to someone who's kind of into this. And interestingly, it's really the first conversation I've had with anyone who is discussing psychological health and safety, psychosocial hazards with young people who aren't already at work. And I think in many cases, this is a part of the challenge. Young people have been groomed since they were really small to just go along and not speak up, and adults know more than they do, which isn't always the case. So let's get into the conversation with an introduction of my guest, by my guest, with this question. Who is Marie Milord?
All right. That was amazing. Hi.
Hi.
I don't even know how much more to add. No, I do have enough.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I do. So I've been a health and safety professional for the last 16 years. But early on, I started off as the first woman in the area that I was working in, right? So that was the time before there was women in safety. So I've worked in heavy civil construction. I've been with utility companies, just a slew of a background. I am a construction health and safety tech. I have my CSP, I have my SMP, all the great technical stuff. But beyond that, I own a business called SoMat Consulting, and the initiative is the Bold and Safe. And to your point, it's about creating bold and safe individuals. And what I provide is training around, obviously, so SoMat Culture is the OSHA part of it, the technical, but the Bold and Safe goes a little bit deeper. And what that does is it teaches psychological and psychosocial skills within young adults, teens, and workers in the workplace. And that came from a lived experience, because when I worked in these environments as a woman, then add to it an African-American woman, right? I didn't feel safe to speak up. I was just a peon amongst a group of individuals. And it didn't help that as I grew up, I was being told, be seen and not heard, stay in a child's place. So it didn't help that now I'm an adult and I'm in these workplaces and I'm just tapping into who I was raised to be, just be seen, not heard. And so when I started this initiative, I wanted to build emotional intelligence, resilience, all the things that I had to work and to find out on my own. And through allyships, people who did not look like me but respected me and said, no, you belong in those rooms. So that's really fundamentally who I am. I have this strong suit of a passion to make people feel seen, heard, valued, for them to to walk into their potential, and to be able to learn how to leave space for the things that they do know, the things that they don't know, for the uncomfortable and for the comfortable, and for all of it. So that's just in a gist of who I am.
Right. Wow. That's going to be the focus of the conversation, is that journey that you've been on, and now your efforts to try to both lead the way and then walk with people down that journey. But before we do that one, the standard question that I ask to everyone who comes on is, what does psychological health and safety mean to you?
Oof, to me, it's not just the being seen. I mean, and the cliche response would be, oh, to create this environment where people feel seen, heard, valued. Yeah, we get that. But what it means to me is about the system, the processes, the environment, everything trying to build its ecosystem around people, and not people having to build themselves around the system and processes and so forth. So what it really means to me is going in back to the basis of people, understanding how they think, how their makeup of their brain. And I really get into like a bit of a neuroscience, psychological. I think they go hand in hand, because how people operate in the real life and how they be seen, valued, looks different for everyone. And it's the chemical makeup of their mind and brain. So how do we leave space and room for all of that? How do we open up an environment where we go, okay, how does one think? How do you feel comfortable? What does even being seen mean to you, right? Because sometimes being seen could be handing someone a mic in the middle of a meeting, or, putting a spotlight, and that doesn't do well for them. And maybe it's as simple as maybe an idea that they give sees itself to fruition. So what does seen, valued mean to a person? So psychological health and safety means to me is going back to people and going to them and saying, what do these things mean to you? And then we build ecosystems and processes and systems around those ideas. You're not going to make everybody feel happy per se, right? And that's not what that's about. But it's about not building things to protect assets. It's not about, protecting the business, right? Because what's a business without your people? So really what it all means to me is going back to people, asking them how do they thrive, and then building an ecosystem around that, which in turn makes them feel seen, valued, and heard.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So what was it that caused a person, particularly with your really traditional kind of entree into safety? I'm less traditional than you. This is a second career for me, to be quite honest. I didn't know that safety was a profession. I was in the fire rescue service doing safety-related work, but I didn't know there were specifically safety people. And so it's only been, as a matter of fact, we probably started about the same time, but I've had a few more birthdays. But anyway, I typically hear, particularly women and people of color, have this similar experience that, we kind of end up in safety and we're the only person in the room, where, the system wasn't necessarily designed for us. And that's pretty typical also across most industries in the U.S. And so for some people, it's difficult to have a conversation about physical safety. And, and we tell ourselves often that, well, I just have to kind of push down some of the ways that I'm feeling, because I got to know about slip, trip, fall hazards, and I got to know about fire extinguishers and seatbelts. And I'm not saying that to diminish how important the physical hazards are, but, as we both know, many of those physical hazards were the product of exposure to a psychosocial one. That's why the person slipped and why they ran into the back of the truck or whatever it is. What is it that got you interested in psychological health and safety, and particularly here in the U.S.? How did you, how did that happen?
Okay, I'll tell you exactly how it happened. I'm a teen mom. So I had my daughter when I got pregnant at 18, I had her at 19, and trying to navigate and find my way. I was in college my first year, had her, couldn't do both anymore. So I got a job at a construction company through a temp agency. And they had me kind of doing administrative work and all those bits. And I just, I'm bringing my stress to work. And I'm just like, but at that time, safety was not a thing, to your point. Safety was not a thing, but they had me doing subcontractor onboarding. So the construction company would have these companies that needed to come on and actually perform the work, but insurance started to go sky high and say, listen, New York City is having these incidents, crane incidents, we got to do something about it. So they moved me into this risk and claims. And because I'm so hungry in survival mode, I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to learn whatever, because my livelihood is at stake. I got to feed my daughter, I got to feed me. What do you need me to do? And I'm learning, and that's just keeping my brain going. So I'm in survival mode at that point. But when you're in survival mode, you're hungry. You'll get it if you have to. And so I ended up in risk and claims at that point, handling the company's litigation. Don't ask me at 19, 20 why they got me doing it, but I think it's because of the way I articulated myself. I was very, I felt like I had to stand up for myself all the time, right? I was the only woman of color in the room. And so when they had me doing these things, I spoke differently. I approached things differently. And there were two incidents that really got to me. One of them where we had set up a traffic control on a highway. And we had these Jersey barriers there. And there was a drunk driver who, thought he knew the road because we just changed it in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. And so he kills himself and a passenger. The litigation part of it, his 2-year-old daughter is suing us the mom is suing us on behalf of his 2-year-old. We just want to make it go away. We just pay it off. But then I noticed we set up the next job in the middle of the night, same way. Not to take any onus and accountability off the drunk driver, but I can tell you now to this day, when there's a traffic difference, it doesn't register to me, especially if it happens in the middle of the night and I'm going to work in the morning. I'm like, wait, what? And then the second incident was someone close to me was working. He went outside doing everything he was supposed to do, preparing the job, and they were doing some concrete work above. A piece of the concrete falls and smashes his hand. He can never work again. And again, let's just pay this claim off and go. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, well, hold on. How are we learning from this? Why are we not learning from this? And again, I'm bringing in my street smarts and that survival, like, well, hold on, this doesn't make sense. I understand that this is, a process. And I never forget in the meeting, I was being told, yeah, okay, we'll listen to that later. And I felt very minimized, but I also felt like that's normal. And I felt like it's okay because I've always felt that way. Like, all right, be seen, not heard. And I'm like, what do I know, right? I only went to 1 year college. I'm just here to make a paycheck. But for some reason, just everything that was going on with me, watching my little girl grow up, and I'm watching this 2-year-old without their father, all of it just started to correlate for me. Like, well, no, it just doesn't feel right. So anyway, I'm working in this risk and claims. Safety starts to become a thing because now the company they want to become ISO. So listen, oh, great. We want to make our counterparts happy. We want to be acquired by a company over in Europe because they have more money. The 2008 recession, they needed the money. And so let's tip-top shape safety. What? Like, now it's a culture shock for a lot of folks there. But you know what they say? They go, she's good at learning. She's quick on her feet. Let's like involve her in our SHEMS and building this SHEMS program. And I'm like, what in the world do you guys want me to do? But I remember the two processes that I thought should change is, traffic controls. Let's do that let's do that in doses. So we give drivers. And I was like, oh, great. I get to have more of a say because not that you wanted to give it to me, but because now insurance is saying you need to have somebody there. And so I create this role and I become safety. But then it's all technical. Everything is like, let's just train folks. Let's send you to an OSHA class and give you everything and you should know all that you need to know. And I was like, all right, fine. I did that for about 3-4 years. And then I started to notice The folks on the ground are running circles around us because they don't need a book to tell them how to do this job. What they need is support and to feel heard, to let you all know this is not going to work. And everything kept coming back to training, training, training. And then that's when I started to study. It's not about the technical part of it, right? To have your OSHA certification, to have your crane pre-quals, to have all of this stuff is great. It's in your pocket. You learn. That only shows someone, hey, I sat in a class and I learned this. But the other bits of it was the challenging of, you want me now to get this certification, but you're putting me back in the same environment. This certification doesn't even work, right? I know what I know, but I need to understand this company's systems and processes. And then that's when I started to just become more humanized. Everything that I was going on in my life, I became empathetic to people. And I started to get into the psychological part of it. And I started to become that person that goes, well, what do you think? Because no one asked me that question. What do you want to see different? And so it just started to grow legs of its own. And as I've gone through my career now, I noticed that when I would start a new job and I was the safety person, people would be like, oh, another safety officer, police. But within a year, it was different. They were like, you approach safety differently. You redefine it. And I'm like, yeah, because I don't want to tell you what what federal says, right? Our regulation. I want you to know it. But OSHA's trying to, or let's say, the NFPA, they're trying to look at everything from abroad, but everywhere looks different. New York City is a whole nother beast of its own. But if we start listening to people, we can combat that beast. If I ask you what you're seeing in real life and you're out there, you're actually putting two wires together, you're actually putting a track together for a train to pass by and to work, if you're actually putting a concrete wall together and rebar work, if you're the one who's really seeing these hazards, you should be the one that should be telling us how to be safe. Right? And we shouldn't need your blood to write it afterwards. And then I just think about all the stress I used to bring to work with me having the background that I have. I started to ask people the simple question, how are you? What's going on? Because now we're asking them to do intricate work, but they're having trouble at home. So the psychosocial stress and all that, and the job didn't leave room for that. It was, we got work to do. But they couldn't tap into that because your brain is either fight or flight. And when you're in stress, you go into a flight mode. So you're unable. So that's when I really started to hone in more why psychological safety mattered, because it was the physical hazards we know are there. But if someone's mind isn't, no. And the psychosocial part of it is, what are your stress factors? Who are you that I have here doing this intricate work for me? So.
Wow. Let me mention something that I relate. My mom was 14 when I was born, and as a matter of fact, by the time she was your age, by the time she was the age that you had your daughter, she had three of us, and the fourth one was on the way. So And as I think about it some days, I'm not sure how she did it. I don't. She didn't give us up for adoption. She didn't, we were with her most of the time, except when she, attempted to go to work. And then I remember, watching my siblings. I'm the eldest of seven. I started watching my siblings when I was 8. And so, and I share that because, to your point, all of these lived experiences follow us into the workplace. They frame how we see everything that's going on, and it doesn't. And it is not. I try to take the value judgment. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. It just is what it is, and then these systems tell us there's something wrong with it because it doesn't align with what they've created. Most business enterprises that I've come across, and this isn't all of them, but most of the ones I've come across, were created for and by 8% of the global population. And the other 92% of us have to kind of force our way in. And as opposed to, again, to your point, why don't we just build these business enterprises around human beings? As these human beings are, we have a job that we want to get done. Does the person have the knowledge, skill, and ability to do the job? But their personality is different. Their concerns are different. And the things they're going to see as hazardous are just going to be different. And can we be able to adjust to that and not, again, make Marie feel like, well, we got to train you this way because that's not going to work here. Well, why not? It's part of me, And the other thing is this distinction, and I certainly want to get your thoughts as well. Dr. Amy Edmonds' work around psychological safety is now really trendy for people. And I think people sometimes pick up on it because it's trendy, but they don't look past it. So, oh, yes, just, bring your whole self to work and we're going to have this environment where you can be yourself. But as soon as I am myself, then I get mistreated. I mean, you don't say it in the meeting. You say it in the hallway after the meeting. You look at me different. When the promotion comes up, I don't get it. I don't get to go out and golf with you, but that's where the decision is made. There's all these things. And again, I'm not saying that any of that in and of itself was even intentional. So a bunch of guys go out and do what a bunch of guys do. But what about the fact that we invited one or more women to participate? So why can't we now do things that we would enjoy doing? Not just the stuff that I enjoy doing. What are the things that they enjoy? And we create this kind of new environment that is best for all of us, not just better for me, and you conform to it all the time. So talk a little bit about the difference, your view on the difference between psychological health and safety and psychosocial hazards and psychological safety.
Right. So first, I want to say that I think a lot of things that we go through have nothing to do with us, but who we need to be in the world. So, just going really quickly back to your mom and to what I mentioned is that I think it's so that we can show up empathetic in places. I think it's so that we can teach the world to leave space for different things that happen to us in life, right? Or the chemical makeup of folk. I think it's just all about how do we give back afterwards. And I think that's really what drove my psychological safety, because I learned a level of empathy that I required and needed. So I do believe I go back and I go, all right, none of what I've been through, right, because I was just a portion, has anything to do with me. It's how I'm showing up currently. I can listen to things and be like, oof, and leave space for it. And so the difference between, psychological health and safety and psychological safety is the psychological health and safety part is the policies, the systems, right? It's how the organizational load, the expectations of folk. Let's put together a wellness group and then tell people, be seen, speak up and everything. Well, what the heck does that even mean? How do you want me to do that? I don't even know. Define that for me, right? And then the psychological safety, right, as she mentions, is just feeling healthy, feeling safe. And that is feeling valued, feeling like you're seen, feeling like you can bring stuff up, feeling like you can challenge things, feeling like you can stop work. And that's the psychological safety part of it. But we're giving all of these things, but we're not even, we don't define it with our policies and procedures. So the psychological health and safety are those expectations, the workload. And then the psychological safety is about how people feel and work within that, right? But neither one are defined entirely, because sometimes we give people the well-being and we're like, let's give them mental health first aid programs. Let's do that. But let's put them back into the expectations and put them back into systems that are not psychologically healthy and safe. Let's put them back amongst, to your point, the percentage of folk who do have, this space where they don't have to be psychologically safe. They don't have to be empathetic either. Everything was handed to them. They've kind of been handed down these things. Why should I have to understand what you are going through? Why should I make you have to feel seen and heard? This is a business. We don't have an obligation to you, right? Let's not change it. But let's protect an asset who will turn its back on us if it so chose to, because its life expectancy does not owe humans any of that time. So, that's the flavor of the month, is let's create these things. Let's create that organizational health through psychological health and safety. But then I look at it and I'm like, define what that even means. Well, you're putting workers who are unhealed adults who have never, ever learned how to feel safe, who have worked for years in a culture where they just came here to work, right? At one point, they were smoking cigarettes just to calm their stress. They were drinking on the job to calm their stress. And all we did was we created a drug and alcohol awareness policy. Well, what about the policy that helps tell them why you even decided to go into that? What about the policy and the creation? I'm not saying this is the onus of the business, but there should be some accountability on the business to understand and to assist and to help. What if that looks like, hey, we know someone's drinking on the job. Let's send them to a outpatient program that is a part, right, of us. And that's what psychological health and safety would look like from an organization point of view. And then it will trickle down into someone feeling able to stop a job, to bring stuff up. You know, some folk rather sit back and go, I'm just going to sit in the room. Last time I brought up something, no one did anything about it. What's the point?
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, to your point about definitions, the driver behind me writing my book was the lack of a definition. So I when I was doing my dissertation, I stumbled across ISO 45003. I'd never really heard of it. Not really. I mean, so I tell the story often. I saw a webinar about this new psychological health and safety standard, and I go like, I'll go. And it was like at 6:00 in the morning. And that's opened up an entirely, new group of a friend group for me, as a matter of fact, because I reached out to some of the folks involved, and that led to me writing this book. But when I looked at the standard itself does not define a psychosocial hazard. It defines psychosocial risk, but not a psychosocial hazard. So I go like, and then the other definitions I found around the world. I mean, I looked for 9 or 10 or 12 countries who actually have laws in place, but their definitions to me look like lists of things. This is a psychosocial hazard, this and this and workload. Well, why is it? Because workload in and of itself is not a hazard. It isn't. Workload is a hazard to the person that's a hazard to, and that's where my definition, emanates from. It's a psychosocial factor that's perceived or experienced by the person exposed as threatening to them to the extent it changes their behavior. It's an issue to me because of my background and my experience. That same level of work for somebody else might be fine. It just isn't for me. And that doesn't make them right, me wrong, me right, them wrong, or the work bad either. That's not the issue. It's how do we align the expectations of the business or the organization with the human that we brought to do it. And here we were having this conversation before I pushed record. As a lot of these business functions get shifted to artificial intelligence, if we don't get this psychological and psychosocial part ingrained in that process, because machines don't care. They're ones and zeros. That's it. They don't feel anything. They execute on what they've been told. And if the drivers of this conversation feel like humans are just there to be told what to do, we're in for some really dark days, to be quite honest. But on the other hand, I believe we have the opportunity to get us as humans to recognize this is not about the business and the profit and the rules and the regulations. It is about the humans. And these are things that we need to support the humans. We need a policy not to be mean to people, but to support people. We need a practice to do things this way so we get consistency, so both David and Marie know how it works. And we also need to be flexible enough that when we bring a whole new group of people, younger people, older people, taller people, shorter people, women, men, when we bring different people, we have to be in this constant state of evolving our policies. And I'll say this last one, I'll move on to something else. There's a difference between being safe and feeling safe.
Oh, absolutely.
They're just different. I mean, you can be you can be objectively in a hazard-free environment, but I don't feel that way. I just feel some kind of way about this. Why? Because of my background, because of the trauma from the last job, because of the trauma at home. And I brought that with me. So it feels uncomfortable to me, even though physically there really isn't anything to put my finger on. It just feels challenging for me. And we as safety professionals have to at least acknowledge that and not, well, she just needs to get tougher. No, we need to adjust the environment because that's actually not as difficult as we want to make it seem.
Yeah. And it really isn't. There's a difference between putting on my hard hat, being safe at that point, and then my feet not being that feeling that gets in my chest, right? That I should be able to stop, take back off my hard hat, turn around and say to someone, this doesn't feel right. And though it's invisible, a person say, you know what? Okay, let's revisit this. Sometimes we don't see it, so we're just like, it's got to be in our head, which sometimes could be a trauma response on maybe the last job, right? The same smell, everything. But I think we have to leave room for that pause regardless. That's just like, every time there's a complaint that's brought in or 911 is called the fire department, they show up regardless if there really is a fire or not. You say certain words, trigger words, they have to show up. Right? Because you smell it, you don't see it, but it might be happening. So, yeah, for sure.
So talk to me a little bit about this program and the work that you do, having these conversations with people who aren't working yet, who are, and I just think it's so, first of all, it's a very unique approach because I at least some of the circles that I run in, it comes across as if we feel like this is way above the heads of they won't understand and people don't understand. And I think that's I don't know if I agree with that. This whole conversation about psychological health and safety isn't going to work if it's so complicated that nobody gets it. That's not going to work. So chat a little bit about the program that you have with promoting psychological health and safety with young people.
Oh, yeah. So the bold and safe is these kids know a lot more than we think. I can tell you when I was younger, the stuff that I knew that, I didn't think was really, really smart. It was if someone just heard me. And the program that I've created is about children. And I don't like to call them children always, but, it ranges from ages 14 to about like 30, right, that I've had in some of my sessions. And it's about teaching them and defining the things that they are going to hear when they get into the workplace so they can be better leaders in corporate America and in communities. And what does that look like? Resilience. It's about creating psychological safety amongst each other and what that even looks like. How to identify red flags and green flags in relationships, conversations, so you don't fall into certain conversations that don't feed into you, and how to even build relationships that are either transactional and leaving that there and meaningful. And the whole entire program is about also, right, what does that even look like? So the first thing that I do is I go in and I ask everybody anonymously, how do they feel today? What's going on? Because as we've seen, our responses change on a day-to-day basis based on how you're feeling, right? And a lot of the times it's based on what happened to me last night or what's going on with me today. And so I start that off with the kids. And then I ask them, do you know the meaning of psychological safety? Or do you know what it means to be safe? And they go, no. Some of them don't. And some adults will say, well, yeah, safe is like if I go in my car and put my seatbelt on. Safe is, like making sure that I'm looking down when I'm walking down the stairs. And I'm like, yeah, but that's just the surface. What if you miss a step? And then you kind of go, I don't know what just happened. That feeling of I don't know what just happened is what we want to tap into. What made in that moment your mind go somewhere else? Your thoughts, your feelings, right? And so to what we were talking about before, you press record is preparing the youth and also helping people who are seasoned understand resilience, how to pivot, how to be okay with disappointment, because it's going to come. How to understand anxiety, how to understand where those feelings are coming from, how stress is actually a good thing because it gives production. It makes people want to go for the things that they did not think that they'd go for. There's really good stress out there. And so I teach them how to maximize those stress and then how to actually take the bad stress and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do next, and use that as lived and learning experience where it doesn't decapitate them or make them handicapped to their situation. Because there are certain people that will lead with trauma. And so when you deal with kids, right, all the things that they're going through now is only building up for when they're 25 years old. You go to meet them, you go, hi, my name is, they go, my name is, and this is everything that I've been through and the reason why I have not succeeded. And so what I go in and I teach them is, no, there are ways to take everything that you're going through. And I like adverse environments, the teenagers that are there that don't really have the resources to kind of, learn these things. I go into those environments and I tell them, psychological safety is an environment that you create. And then the beauty is that you create the community where you get to choose who's in your life. Right now, you have to tolerate your family members and the folks that are brought around you because you're a child. And this is how I'm going to teach you how to deal with that right now, right? So we tell adults to journal. It's not always the best to tell children to journal because they might not be in an environment where a journal is kept secret. So how other ways do we go about it? So what I do is I go through different scenarios and prompts that they're dealing with now. Social media, everything ends up on social media. I give them flags and they do red flag, green flag. How to identify that amongst each other. I have them break out into groups, and some of them are strangers, but I have them start a healthy conversation because that's where it starts. You don't want to, I show them the difference between trauma bonding, right? And how to build healthy and how to be okay with allyship, someone who doesn't look like you. How to, use those moments, how to use those people to grow. Because in corporate America, when you get there, you don't want to be in this box where you only want to stay with people who look like you. You don't want to only be like, no, this is where I'm comfortable, because nothing grows there. So I'm teaching these kids from 13 years old, how to be uncomfortable, how to pivot, how to handle those stress factors, and how all of that is conducive to who they need to be, who they're going to be, and how they're going to constantly have to navigate what that means. Because now the flavor words is anxiety. I'm anxious. You can be anxious. Everyone should be anxious. When you're about to cross the street and a car is coming by, your brain is supposed to get anxious. When you're walking down a dark alley, you're supposed to be anxious, but you're not supposed to stay there. You're not supposed to stay there, right? You need to find a way and the skills to climb out of that. And a lot of times what I see is in adults, going back to in the rooms where I'm teaching this amongst adults that have been doing this work for forever, boots on the ground, they're like, I never learned how to do that. So everything I do is off of instinct and survival. I'm going about the job from an instinct place. I'm just survival. I got to get this work done. I never learned how to stop, pause, reflect. And so I take all that and I go with the kids and I go, do you all know how to stop, pause, and reflect? They go, no. So then we work through that. Pause and reflection. Learn to normalize stopping people when they say something and go, what do you mean by that?
Right.
And forcing them to define it, because some folk are talking to you and they're just talking out of their they don't even have, so that is about, I just noticed that a lot of the adults that I've worked with for the last 16 years, they're not choosing to be this way. It's a pileup of everything that they've gone through, conditional, their environment. So that brings in the environmental sciences into it. And so what I do is I try to get these kids to know, I know you're not going into health and safety. Nobody's asking you that. But I'm pretty sure you're going to go into management roles, leadership roles, CEO, prayerfully C-suite, entrepreneurship, CEO. You're going to have to really gain the tools to navigate the disappointments that come from those things.
That's exactly right. Wow.
I don't want it to cripple you, and I don't want to see you in therapy at 35 years old, going back to something at 13 that never got addressed.
Exactly.
And now you're in the workplace imagine being faced at your job with something that happened to you at 13 that you didn't know how to deal with then, and you want me to know how to deal with it now? Because that's the way life works, right? And I believe that's exactly the way life works. I believe in God, and I believe that He's going to continue to make things show up. It's now how you show up differently. And so this is all the programming that I do with them to teach them that resilience, emotional intelligence, how to regulate themselves. I used to have an issue with outbursts. Like, I used to feel like if I have an outburst, people in the room heard me. And now they're not going to mess with me. But you know what that goes back to? That goes back to me fighting for different things for my little girl when we were that. But in the workplace, there was no need for that. So I teach these kids, there's a time and a place to show up differently. And let's start now. And as you build those tools, you'll become leaders in your community. And it starts there. Be a leader in your community first, the rest will follow. And so that's really the program in a gist.
Wow. There's so much there. And we barely have time to scratch the surface, but you make me think about this theoretical construct I've been working on just recently. There's something that I call a psychosocial deterioration pathway. And it is the connection between a hazard and trauma. And the further back in this, so hazards generate risk, which creates situations where we could be harmed. And that harm causes us to feel pain. And some of that pain becomes hurt, and some of that hurt becomes trauma. The earlier we can interrupt that path, the better off people are going to be. So if a person's never exposed to the hazard, there's not going to be any trauma around it. But we can't eliminate all of them. But that is, if we could always be focused, let's find the root cause of this risk and harm and pain and hurt. Let's get, because often we stop short of that. Again, to your point, the person is already traumatized. They've been traumatized. And so what do? Instead of figuring out what caused the trauma, we simply expose them to similar things and not as much of it. And they keep reverting back to the trauma. They keep getting quote unquote triggered because we're doing the same thing. So why is it that our workplaces, the hours that we work in the United States, are still built on a standard that was established in 1938? Why is it that we high-five each other when people have done a 60-hour work week? When in Iceland, 5 years ago, they decided, well, that seems like that's a lot. They dropped virtually 80% of Iceland works a 32-hour work week that nobody got a cut in pay. So again, why aren't we approaching the things that were the hazard in the first place and changing them, eliminating the ones that we can, substituting them for things that are less hazardous, creating engineering controls, that entire hierarchy of controls that we talk about? Why aren't we approaching that? And again, to another point that you made, we're not trying to make safety professionals out of everybody, but on Maslow's hierarchy, just above breathing, eating, and sleeping is safety. And most people have no conversation about it. We don't teach people what safety is, so therefore they don't know what safety is. Say, skip over it and let's talk about belonging and all this other stuff. I don't feel safe here. I'm never going to belong if I don't feel safe here. Never. Doesn't matter what you do. I don't feel safe. I don't. And yeah, I know the floors are non-skid and I've got a hard hat, but I don't feel safe. And that's where, and what you're doing that is so exciting is getting to folks when they are still young enough. They haven't had as much trauma, because we're all going to have it. There's no way to live a life and not have any, but they learn early on how to identify it, how to assess it, how to mitigate it in their own lives. And those people, as they start businesses, they start with that. As they go into other organizations, they start with that tool, and they're able to recognize, oh yeah, that's not going to work. We can do it this way. I have a contribution over here, but yeah, that was not going to work well.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And everywhere outside of the US, it's a legislation, right? Not everywhere, but a lot of countries, it's part
About
of their
40 of them last I
legislation.
checked.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. So my
yes.
current company is out of the UK, and they actually have legislation around, psychological safety and stress awareness. And so when it comes to the US, you know how we get away with it? Oh, that's HIPAA.
Right, right,
We don't want to
right.
talk about that. That's someone's personal life. And it's okay if you don't go up to someone and go, hey, do you have depression today? Right? Yeah, no, you're not doing that. What you are doing is creating a system where people feel comfortable coming forward and saying, I have depression, but I'm really darn good at my job. Because I can't tell you how many people have been hired in any company that I've worked for based on their resume, and they can't even speak up in a meeting, so they make everyone anxious. They don't do well with people, but their resume says that they know everything. We built a system around that kind of person. As long as you can get it done in the drawing, you don't have to talk to people, you don't have to engage people, you don't have to empower them either. And so people are now working around you. They don't feel safe because they don't even know what's in your mind. You don't even speak out. You don't even speak. Do you speak?
I will take it even further. We have many, and I did a post on LinkedIn a while back about this. We have mistaken sociopathic behaviors as leadership skills
Oof.
and
Yes.
created these leadership positions, giving people a lot of power who are sociopaths. who have
Yes.
who have no empathy whatsoever, and they now they never. This is not a criticism of them; it's an observation that they never learned how to care for other human beings. They were treated like trash their entire life, and then they got some power. And the way they protect themselves from that little 8-year-old who was damaged is beat up on other people and yell at people, and they create entire systems that reinforce that and look for other bullies and harassers, and then they say it's and I got to say it's manly to no, actually it's shows that you're really traumatized and hurt. You're a little boy who was beat up as a little boy who never really, or a little girl who was mistreated who never really got over that, never addressed it, never faced it. And now you're taking it out on the rest of us.
Right, because you got a little power, you got some space to talk, and oh my God. Oh yeah.
And there we go. And so again, and you know something about it as we start to wrap this up. If you had a magic wand, and knowing a little bit about what's going on in some of these other countries, what are just 2 or 3 things that organizations who are interested, I want to do better. There's not a law that makes me, but I want to do better. What are 2 or 3 things that they could consider that will start to shift that, or start to limit their journey down that pathway I talked about?
So one thing I would say, I have like 2 or 3. One would be that the way that folks go about jobs where they fear OSHA, there should be a standard where there is a psychological health and safety standard where 45,003, if that were like a regulation, people would be afraid of. Let's put together systems and processes that mirror it, or a system that values people, because we're too afraid, right, to not do it. And that would be my magic wand for companies to go into making it their core value, to making it the front page. They were built around people, not just saying it to sound good, but really, really people come out of those companies and go, yeah, I really feel seen. I really feel heard. I'm at work more than I'm home. And I feel a sense of peace when I go to work, right? Because you're always going to deal with the stuff at home because you can't control how crazy your kids are going to get, how crazy the dog is going to get, what's going to happen with the house. Enough. But you want to be able to go to work and say, I had a good time being productive and showing up in a place in my life. So my magic wand would be for them to instill some type of regulation around stress awareness, well-being, and psychological health and safety. And then to just the second one is to make it a part of K through 12 education. Put it in schools. It's a part of school. So one thing we got rid of is script, where people can't even sign, kids can't even sign anymore, right? And it was there. That was something that was teaching children to have your signature, something that we know it's you. and it values who you are. So something that was like around at that time has been taken away. So guess what? I think that there should be something, psychological health and safety, that should be a part of K through 12 education. Getting them really ready for the real world. Letting them know you're going to be disappointed, but this is how you deal with it. The same way that this math problem you're going to get, the same way you're going to have to learn how to read, same way you're going to have to learn how to write, use a computer. Let me teach you how to navigate your emotions in the world now. And I think we would have way less bullies. I think we would have way less kids that are being bullied. And everyone would learn how to be in a cohesive environment and learn how to leave space for everyone's differences. We wouldn't need IEP programs. We wouldn't need special education, because everything would be seen as one system built around various people and the differences within people.
Right. Tell me how many times in your work life that you have had to balance an equation or diagram a sentence. Tell me. I can't recall a single solitary time.
I can't.
Not a one. So why?
And now that we have AI, we don't need some of the certain things anymore, because that's not going away.
But how often have I had to interact with other human beings and been disappointed or had to get my point across? We should be spending time teaching people how first to understand themselves and then to understand other people.
Yes.
Because if we can get that part, because I got to know myself, because then that helps me pick which I can't. There is no scenario that is set up that's going to work for everybody. That's ridiculous. We're too different. So we need different. But I got to know me. I got to know what works for me, because again, the point that you made earlier, there are some people, the reason why your job is toxic, it's toxic to you. You never should have went to work there anyway. If had you known what triggered you, why did you apply for that job? You never should have applied for that promotion, because it required you to do something that you're not really good at. You don't enjoy people. You don't enjoy pets. You don't enjoy whatever it is. So why go? Because it was the money. They offered me more money. So I did something. I don't feel comfortable, but I want that money. So I go in there and I make myself miserable, and everybody around me is miserable, because it's really not really a fit for me. Know me. No, and face up to there's some things about me that are different. There's some things I've had some traumas in my life. I've had some things that, at my age now, they're still in the background. I deal with them, but they're there. I can't act like they're not there. So I don't need to put myself in that scenario yet again and expose other people yet again to my trauma.
And that's why I have a certain level of adoration for what we deem neurodivergence, because they find a sense of that they're different, they're interesting, and they go in a lane of their own, right? And then we have this system in place where it's like they don't fit in it, but they have the ideas and the thought process that keep a lot of the systems that we have going around and around. They were able to branch off and go, this doesn't work for me. This is not who I am. I'm going to go in my lane and create businesses that today is going to help the world further along. But we don't, through K through 12, and even in companies, we don't leave space for that. We don't. We say that needs a special education. When I think special education should really be for the folks who can't tap in to the other percentage of their brain, because the average human only uses about 10% of their brain. The difference with a neurodivergent, they tap into the extended. So not only are they using 10%, they're using an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe I should be poured into that I can only use 10% of my brain and tap in more. Flip the script. Because then you'll be able to really get down to who people are, right? You'll build a system that values the difference and not keep pouring into folks that when you get older, you don't even use anymore. And especially since now we're getting into a different day and age, we definitely need to look at the curriculum, the things we're showing kids. We should be showing them financial literacy, psychological health and safety. Those are real stuff.
Yes.
The rest of it is going to come, because guess what? We're going to train them anyway when they get older into a job.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, and many of those skills are going to change as the environment changes anyway. And to get to your point about just because a person doesn't use script writing anymore can we replace that with something else that gives them value, gives them peace, and helps them feel individual? And so, again, sometimes we get locked on, it's got to be a particular way. No, it doesn't have to be done a particular. It's not how we do it. It's what we're doing and why that really is more important. And leave options. I mean, we really, if you and me are going to work together, if we're going to accomplish something, we have to agree on what the goal is. Because otherwise, we'll never know when we got there. But how we get there?
Yeah. Give people the what and let them figure out and let them tell you their why and their how.
Absolutely. 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 So, oh boy, this could go on, but I try to keep these, kind of below an hour. So, if there are folks out there who want to learn more about the program that you've created, the work that you do, and they're intrigued by this conversation, want to continue it, how best to get a hold of you?
So I'm on various platforms because, in 2025, everyone uses something different. So LinkedIn is Marie Milord. I have my email is info@somatculture.com. I have a website, www.somatculture.com. And then I have that's the email, the info. So it's all different ways you can reach out to me and follow me on social media. I have an Instagram @SoMat Bold and Safe, where I have like clips of the programs and different bits like that. And if you need like an OSHA training class, any of those job brief classes, how to treat, how to show individuals going into construction or workplace environments, how to lead conversations, that is through the www.somatculture.com. But, all different ways you can get in touch with me. And I have all of them on my phone where it pops up. So
Right. Absolutely. Marie, thank you so much for this is, as I said, I don't know whether we're recording or not, but I really enjoy these opportunities to learn more myself about people that are doing different or taking different approaches to address the whole concept of, psychological health and safety. And it's really exciting that it's going on here in the U.S. I mean, this podcast started, we're getting close to 4 years, but a little over 3 years ago, it started, and I didn't think there was anybody who got this. Most of the folks I was talking to were in Australia or Canada or the UK, but over these few years, more and more people, I'm finding that we're out there. We're out there. It's just creating the environment for us to be able to connect and share, and build this community of people who recognize how important this is. This concept can change the world. It can certainly change the business community. It is, if, so what, you don't have a DEI program. If you have psychological health and safety, you don't really need one.
Right.
So
that part.
So what, some of our institutions around, equal opportunity and whatnot aren't functioning the way we want. If you have psychological health and safety for people, you don't have to worry about those things, because the entire system is set up around the human beings and to create a psychologically healthy and safe place for people. So thank you so much for your contributions.
You.
And I foresee big things. Big things. So
from your mouth to God's ears.
Absolutely. So if you're watching or listening to the podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will bring you back to a episode in the future. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. And please do join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com, or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.